Okay, so, hi, hello, welcome back to another Creepypasta Story video. Today we're going to be reading Sally Play With Me, but before getting into it, I do want to say a few things. First off, this video is a one take, by the way, so if you do hear me stumble, mumble, fumble, and mess up my words, I am sorry. This video, as I mentioned, is a one take, and I don't really have anything to really edit my videos with, so, it is what it is. Second thing I do want to say, please consider using code GOONS at gamersubs.gg. It's code GOONS, and you get 10% off at checkout. So gamersubs is pretty much like an adult Kool-Aid. There's caffeinated and non-caffeinated versions, and they have a lot of cool merch and shaker cups and flavors for the tubs. So go check them out. The link is in the description. I'm not doing them justice, but go check the description. You'll see some pretty cool stuff on the website. So go check them out. Okay, so outside of that, let's get into it. The creepypasta we are going to be reading today is called Sally or Play With Me. So, let's get into it. The summer was nice and warm that year. The sun, as always. It brought warmth to your skin, and the light breeze that swept through the old neighborhood made the days not too hot or cold. It was simply perfect. It was perfect weather, but there was one summer that Sally will never forget. Sally was a young girl. She was 8 years old. She had long, curly brown hair and bright green eyes. She was always polite, and she never lied. And she always did what she was told. Her mother and father simply adored her, and they couldn't ask for a better daughter. Sally giggled as she played with her friends outside their home. They played various games like hopscotch and jump rope. They even played with dolls and even played tag. Sally's mother smiled warmly at the innocent sight and wiped her hands on an apron, calling out, "Sally, come inside now. It's time for lunch." Sally looked up from playing with her doll and smiled. "Okay, Mommy." Sitting down at the dinner table, Sally lightly bounced in her seat, excited for who knows what. Her mother placed down a peanut butter and jelly sandwich with the crust cut off, some carrot and celery sticks on the side, and some juice to drink. "Thank you, Mama." "You're welcome, sweetie." As the child began to take hold of her sandwich, her mother took a seat across from the girl and smiled, watching her eat. "Guess what? Your Uncle Johnny is coming over." Sally looked up and smiled. The corner of her lips had traces of peanut butter on them. Uncle Johnny?" she repeated through her food. Her mother laughed and nodded. "Mm-hmm. He's coming to help Daddy with his job and to look after you. Maybe all of us can go to the carnival too." Sally chewed the rest of her bite quickly and swallowed. "Can Sarah and Jenny come too?" Her mother looked up and thought. "Well, that's up to their mom and dad to say, but if they can, sure." Again, the child giggled and bounced in her seat again, now even more excited of this year's summer vacation. Over the course of the next few days, Uncle Johnny drove up to the house, and when he climbed out of his car, the man stretched his arms over his head to let out a tired sigh. "Uncle Johnny," a small voice chirped, earning the attention of the man. Sally dropped the jump rope she was playing with and ran over to the family member and hugged him. "Hey Sal, how you been?" he asked, lifting up the girl with ease, giving her a proper hug. The girl giggled and looked back to her friends, who were now waving in their direction. "I've been playing with Sarah and Jenny. Let's go inside and tell Mama that you're here." "It sounds like a great idea." He smiled and walked inside the house, calling out to the woman. "Mary, I'm here," he called, followed by Sally mimicking him. "Mama, he's here." The housewife hurried out of the kitchen and smiled to see that Johnny made it. "Johnny, you got here safe and sound." The man placed the girl down on the ground and gave her bottom a pat to send her off, and he hugged the woman. "Of course I did. Why else wouldn't I come here safe and sound?" he laughed. Walking into the kitchen with the woman, Sally trotted over to the front door, calling out that she was going back to play outside. Make sure you come in before dark." "Yes, ma'am," and off the girl went. As dinner drew near, Sally's father came home, happy to see his brother was there as well. Walking in with his daughter, he strode up to Johnny with a handshake and a hug. "It's nice to see you, man. How have you been?" he asked, crossing his arms. Watching his wife set the table up for supper, Johnny gave a shrug of his shoulders, fiddling with his thumbs. "Karen and I split up." That's terrible. I'm sorry, Johnny." Johnny then shook his head with a smile. "Nah, it's alright. I'm happy. I can move freely without having someone constantly wanting to know where I am or what I'm even doing." The two men laughed together, making their way to the table to eat. "Thank you. I'm glad you liked it." It's yummy, Mama." And the adult smiled and chuckled from the child's praise. Plate after plate was empty, and Sally began to yawn over and over again, rubbing her eyes with her hands. Her mother smiled and gently rubbed her back. "It looks like someone's tired. It's time for bed, Sally." Sally nodded and hopped off her seat, picking up her plate and carrying it over to the sink. Her mother rose up to take her to bed, but then stopped from John grabbing a hold of her arm. "I'll take her to bed," he smiled, earning one in return. "Alright, thank you, John." The man nodded, watching the woman make her way to clean the dishes to put any leftovers, then looked to see his brother leave for the bathroom to wash up, and followed after the young girl to her room. John smiled and closed the door behind him, watching the girl rummage around through her dresser for pajamas to wear. "You need help?" he asked, watching the girl look up and nod. "Okay, let's see what you got." The man waltzed up alongside her and began looking through her various pajamas. "You got some strawberry printed ones. I bet you smell just like them in your dreams." He took the shirt up and showed her, giving it a few deep inhales. Sally giggled and shook her head, indicating that she didn't want to wear her strawberry pajamas. Johnny nodded and placed his shirt back, then pulled out another shirt with a unicorn on it. "How about this one? Bet you'll ride on Miss Unicorn here." And again, the child giggled and shook her head no. The man let out a small huff before placing it back, then took out a regular white nightgown. "How about this? Be able to turn into a princess with this one." Sally's eyes lit up and clapped her hands excitedly and nodded, placing the gown on her bed. He reached over to her and began to help her out. "I can get dressed, Uncle," she said with a smile, looking down at his hands on her shirt. The man smiled and nodded and continued working his way down her shirt. Okay, I'm stepping in here. I didn't know the story was going this route, so my bad. Moving on, though. "I bet you can, but you're tired. Why not have some help?" he asked, watching Sally nod a few times. Once getting her shirt unbuttoned, he slipped it off her shoulders and gave her tummy a nice poke, making her giggle. He grinned and took a hold of the rim of the shorts and pulled them down. Finally, the man grabbed a hold of the nightgown and pushed the opening over her head, making sure her arms could go through the sleeves. "All done," he said happily, watching the girl smile and giggling, and when she bounded on top of her bed, Johnny rose and picked up her clothes. The door opened up and walked in, and Sally's mother... The door opened up and walked in. Sally's mother was coming in to tuck her in. "You're ready for bed?" she asked, walking around the bed. Johnny looked up and hurried over to the other side of the bed. "I'll tuck her in. Is that okay?" Mary looked up at him and smiled, shaking her head. "Of course not." She looked down at her daughter and leaned in, kissing the child on the forehead. "Good night, sweetheart." "Good night, Mama," giving the girl a gentle rub with her thumb on her forehead. The woman took out the clothes Johnny had and made her way out of the room. Johnny smiled to the mother and walked over to the light switch, flicking it off. He carefully closed the door behind him and locked it. Slowly, he looked over to his shoulder towards Sally. Johnny wore a chilling, crooked smile. A few days after, Mary noticed that Sally wasn't acting herself. She wasn't smiling as brightly as she did. She wasn't chipper and didn't speak with the same amount of happiness. Mary took a hold of the child's hand before she left to play with her friends and took her aside. Sally looked up at her mother with a confused look. "Honey, are you feeling okay?" she asked, kneeling down to be at the child's height. Sally stared at her idly and slowly began to weep. Her mother widened her eyes in confusion. "Sally." "Mama, I didn't want to," the girl managed to say through hiccuping sobs. "I didn't want to do what, sweetie?" I didn't want to play. I didn't want to play his game." The child looked up at her mother and hugged her tight. Okay, I'm stepping back in again. I did not know the story was going down this route. I am so sorry to those right here. I'm sorry, I did not know it was going down this route. This is some Broska stuff right here. I'm sorry. Okay, alright, if you guys want to step away from this video right now, feel free. It's gonna get messed up. Okay. You've been warned. Moving on. He touched me and made me touch him. Mary frowned and gently began stroking the child's hair, comforting her, lightly shushing her to calm her down. "Shh, it's okay, Mary. Oh, it's okay, Sally. Mama's here now." It was a nightmare, that's all. The girl had a scary nightmare. "Everything is fine now, okay? Don't worry about it anymore." She watched Sally look up at her, her breathing chopped up from her crying, and smiled. "Okay, Mama." Her mother smiled and kissed her forehead. "Now go wash up and don't want to play with your friends with a dirty face." So I left out a small giggle and ran off to the bathroom to wash her face. Later that day, Johnny and his brother came back home from work. Frank sighed, smiling when he saw Sally wave to him. The father waved back and closed the car door, making his way up to the house. Johnny looked up at Sally as well and smiled, waving to her. The child's smile slowly wilted, showing less happiness in it, but waved back. Johnny also walked inside the house, pausing when he heard the conversation between his brother and his wife. "Sally, what?" Frank asked. "She had a nightmare, a very bad one. She said he touched her." "Well, who the hell is he?" I don't know, Frank, but it was only a nightmare. I just want to inform you on what's been going on with her and why she was acting differently." Johnny furrowed his brows in anger, his knuckles turning white, then calmed down quickly. Thinking fast, he put on a smile and walked into the room, making it look like he just walked into a conversation, and rose his brows. "Whoops, did I interrupt something?" he asked, watching the couple shake their heads. Johnny smiled again and thumbed back in the direction of the car. "I'm going to head to the store. You need anything, Mary?" The woman smiled and looked towards the kitchen. "Yes, actually. Can you get me some eggs and milk, and some bread and juice?" Johnny nodded, about to leave until he paused. "Sally wanted to come along too. She just wanted to inform you." Mary smiled. "Thank you, John." He nodded again and made his way out of the house, keys in hand, looking out to Sally with her friends. He cupped his hand over his mouth. "Sally!" The child looked up at him and stared. "Come on, let's go to the store." John made his way over to the car, gesturing for the girl to follow him. Sally sat there for a moment, then placed her dolls on the grass. "I'll be back. Please watch over Marzipan and Lily for me." Jenny and Sarah both smiled and nodded. They continued to play their game with dolls without her. Sally reluctantly made her way around the car, climbing into the passenger seat and buckled herself in. "Did Mama want you to go to the store?" she asked. Johnny nodded and put the keys in the ignition, turning it on, and backed out the driveway. "Yep, she wants me to go get some food for her. Maybe I can get you something too." He grinned, looking down at the child. Sally nervously smiled back and looked ahead, watching the scenery pass by and as soon as they got to the road leading to the store, Sally noticed that he wasn't slowing down to turn into the parking lot. She furrowed her brows, confused, and looked up at him. "Uncle Johnny, the store is back that way," she asked, pointing in the direction of the Whole Foods store. But nothing came from the man. He just continued driving, and a very faint smile on his face. The child sat up and looked past the back seat, watching the store slowly grow smaller till it was out of the sight. Realizing that they weren't going grocery shopping, the child watched her uncle drive into the small parking lot in the community park near town. No one went to the park on Sundays, and Sally felt nervous. Her breathing quickened, watching the man with wide eyes. Johnny put the car into park and turned the ignition off, looking to the child, and anger obviously showing in his features. "You told your mom what happened, didn't you?" he asked, watching the girl frantically shake her head no. "You're not playing the game, right, Sally?" His tone almost had a slight singing to it. The man reached over and pulled the girl to him, ignoring the struggling that she was putting up and her whimpering pleas. "You said you played the game with me, Sally, and you lied to me." Opening the car door beside him, the man climbed out along with the child and shoved her to the ground, quickly pinning her down, ignoring the cries and writhing of the child was making. "You have to be punished now for breaking the rules." He said that in a slight, sing-songy tone and began to unbuckle his belt. Okay, I'm jumping back in again. I'm so fucking sorry. But I'm already too far into the story. Yeah, again, I apologize. Moving on. This just in. A couple finds the body of an 8-year-old Sally Williams in the community park. The week-long search is now closed. More tonight at 9. She could have sworn that she closed her door before climbing into bed, and guess I forgot. Getting up from the warmth and comfort of her bed, the teen made her way across the room and shut the door. Before she could climb back into her covers, a creak outside in the hall rose up. Was her parents up? They must have checked on her to see if she was asleep or something. As soon as she got her legs covered up, the teen froze in fear at the faint sound of crying, though it sounded like the cries of a child, just slowly rising up from the bed once more. The girl made her way to her door and opened it. The crying seemed to be louder outside of her room. Peering down the darkness, the teen crept down the hallway, following the sounds of the whimpering. Once getting to the end of the hall, the girl gasped. Sitting on the floor in front of the moonlit window was a little girl. She was hunched over and crying. How did the little girl get into the house? Did she get through the window? So swallowing hard, the teenager spoke up. "Who are you, and how did you get into my house?" she asked. Suddenly, the crying stopped. The child slowly moving her trembling hands away from her face and looked behind her, just twitching lightly. Blood replaced her tears, staining her hand. There was a deep clot of blood and hair on the side of her head. There was blood leaking from the wound down her face and onto the dirty nightgown. Her bright green eyes seemed like they saw right through her soul. The child spoke that, "This is my house." Her voice was raspy and sounding as if she was struggling to speak. The girl's body twitched and wiggled oddly as she rose up from her feet and turned to face the teen. Her feet were dirty as if she'd been running through the mud. Scrapes covered her knees and legs, and the end of her gown was torn and tattered. The name Sally was sewn onto the front. Reaching out with her blood-soaked hand, the girl smiled slowly, blood staining her teeth as she spoke. Okay, so that was Sally. So unlike Baraska, unlike Baraska, I knew what happened in Baraska. And what happened here is probably on the same level as Baraska. If you guys haven't seen Baraska, it's a short story written by J.K. Walker, or C.K. Walker, I think that's her name. It's a good story, don't get me wrong. But part 4 of Baraska gave me similar vibes to Sally. Yet again, you guys don't know, this is a one take because this is streamed live over on Twitch. I don't think my chat really cares about the story, so thank you guys. But yeah, reading that kind of was kind of weird. But yeah, sorry. I should probably have gave a warning for Sally. But yeah, again, sorry. I don't know when this is being posted. But I'm recording this on May 2nd. So yeah. Links down below, all that good stuff. Yet again, I'm sorry for reading that story, but hey, it is what it is. Some creepypastas are just messed up like that. Now I need to go read the Russian sleep experiment now to clear my mind. But I do want to say, sorry for traumatizing you guys for a little bit, and yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and like and subscribe, all that stuff. Links down below. Use code GOONS, and yeah, I'll see you guys later. Bye everyone.